EU climate action. Is it a quite recent priority for EU to intervene for climate? Not really, because in the past, in the Lisbon strategy, which covers the period 10-year period, and the Europe 2020 strategy, could we consider that it consists in the first building blocks? Not really. On one side, green objectives are to reach or identify in this past strategy, for instance, to reach 20% of energy from renewable, 20% increase in energy efficiency, reduction of greenhouse gas emission. But no financial tools are introduced to reach this objective. That's why we could consider that the major milestone, turning point, is the European Green Deal, which covers the period 2021 to 2028. What does it mean, the European Green Deal? It consists in the environmental roadmap of the European Commission, the leading role of the European Commission in implementing the EU Green Strategy. It consists in a set of policies and measures to implement the EU's commitment on the international scene. It involves various actors which have to be coordinated at the European Institutional Triangle, Member States, European Central Bank, European Investment Bank, but also the private sectors. It mobilizes different tools, the regulation rules to respect, public funds like multi-annual financial framework, Next Generation EU, national budget, but also private financing. Now, what about the main priority of the European Green Deal? The objectives to reach are quite clear. First of all, to reach climate neutrality in 2050. And in the middle of the period, at least 55% less net greenhouse gas emission by 2030 compared to the level in the 90s. In this picture, you have the main priority of the European Green Deal. On the bottom of the figure, you have the philosophy of this strategy, financing the transition, but with leaving no one behind. It means to implement a just transition. In each green part, you have the different priority, and we will see in which manner, to what extent, tools are mobilized to reach this objective. Now, what about public actors? Public actors are coordinated through this European Green Deal. First of all, European Commission define what is called, and what is now quite famous, the EU Taxonomy, which enable to identify green activities. EU also is at the origin of new rules, new directives and measures. In addition, public finance money is mobilized to finance climate action through multi-annual financial framework, with the greening of the common agricultural policy, the greening of the cohesion fund for the poorest country in the EU. But also thanks Next Generation EU, which is the European recovery plan introduced in 2021 to 2027. And this Next Generation EU program will provide new money for country and is dedicated to finance at least 37% of national recovery plan, which should be dedicated to combat climate change. And in addition, Member States' own specific program could also be implemented. What about the EU Taxonomy? In these pictures, you have all of the activities which are considered in this typology, in this taxonomy. You could distinguish different sectors which are concerned. First of all, energy sector, building sector, transport sector, but also water supply and sewerage, manufacturing, services, disaster risk management, and more recently ICT and professional activities. Here you have the list of all the activities which are considered as green activities, which could be supported by financing, especially public financing, but also private one. What about the measures which have already been taken at the EU level? In these pictures, you have all of the different types of EU action. You could underline some directives, which are here: Energy Taxation Directive, Energy Efficiency Directive, Renewable Energy Directive, but also some regulation and some program for EU forest strategy, emission trading and road transport building. There is also a social climate fund to reach the just transition. And in the green cell, you could have the list of the European program which already exist. What about the EU budget? Here you have the EU total budget, which is described by the MFF, Multi-Annual Financial Framework. This is the budget for the 7 years covered by the period 2021 to 2027. And in addition, you have the Next Generation EU program. And the area dedicated to climate is behind the line natural resources and environment. It means that more than 400 billion euro is dedicated for direct EU climate action. But we should add the money which is for member states, because remember that 90% of Next Generation EU is directly for member states through the Recovery and Resilience Facility. And here you have the 4 main programs which are oriented for climate action: Power Up, Renovate, and Recharge and Refuel. But member states could have quite different needs depending on their situation. That's why in these pictures you have the priority of each of the 27 countries of the EU, depending on Power Up, Renovate, Recharge and Refuel. So the 3 first categories corresponds to the climate action of member states, finance thanks Next Generation EU. Now, what about private sector? Because private sector is also a crucial actor which could also support financing climate action. To understand, you should have in mind the concept of sustainable finance. Here you have the much more recent definition of sustainable finance, which dates for the beginning of 2024. For European Commission, sustainable finance is defined as an activity which includes environmental, social and governance consideration in investment decision. It leads, in the long run, to more investment in sustainable projects and activities and plays a key role in delivering on the objective of the European Green Deal, which aims to boost the green transition. This means moving toward a green economy through sustainable technology, industry and transport. So this definition of sustainable finance confirms that private finance is also a tool taken into consideration to reach the European Green Deal objective. So the tool is behind green bonds, which is a kind of bonds which is specifically dedicated to finance sustainable activities and investment. To benefit for these green bonds, activities should correspond to the EU Taxonomy, and for investors, they will benefit for a trustworthy green bonds label, following a regulation adopted in November 2023. What about all the private actors which are involved in this financing? In these pictures, you could observe that there is an institutional triangle: European Commission, EU Council and European Parliament, but also the three main actors which could mobilize private funds. First of all, European Central Bank, which is connected to institutional triangle, which could integrate climate risk in different manner. First of all, through monetary policy frameworks, especially through collateral and asset purchase program, but also in assessment of financial stability and through microprudential policies and instruments. The second key actor is the European Security and Market Authority. And the last one is the European Investment Bank. It means that there is different private actors or actors which are connected to financial market, which could also enable to support EU climate action. Thanks for your attention.